Baby, lock them doors and turn them lights down low. Oh. Oh. Bum, bum, ba-da-da-da-dum, bum, ba-da-da-da-dum. All right, here we go. Can do another hour. Oh god, that angle is worse. So hard when I can't actually see what it is until... Well, anyway, here we go. Chapter 16. Chapter 16. Chapter 16. Chapter 16. Nightblade, Chapter 16. Nightblade, Chapter 16. Nightblade, Chapter 16. Lauren slipped, her boots scrabbling on the cobblestones as she almost pitched to the ground. Byrne tightened his vise-like grip on her shoulder, and she winced with pain. "Keep your feet, lest we chop them off," he growled. Fear scattered her thoughts. How had the constables found her so quickly? Where would they take her? The unfairness of it cut her to the bone. It was Zane they pursued, and Zane who should be in their clutches now. I do not know where the wizard is," she pleaded. "Let me go. I have done nothing." Byrne did not reply. Lauren looked to Corin. The shorter constable's eyes... Hey, microphone. I really wish I could figure out why it does that. The shorter constable's eyes met hers for a moment. His glare seemed resolute, but not so hateful as Byrne's. If she would find leniency with either of them, it would be with Corin. "I am only a forester's daughter. What do you want from me?" Corin's mouth turned down. Oh my god. Corin's mouth turned down. "We have questions. You would do well to answer them honestly." "I have told you. I know nothing." They answered her only with silence. She searched the streets around her for succor, halfway hoping that Annis might return with some plan for her escape. But Lauren had sent Annis's horse running, and in her heart of hearts she did not expect the girl to return. Nothing about the city seemed familiar. Lauren had only vague childhood memories of large buildings and winding streets. Now the buildings seemed smaller, but the streets no less confusing. After the first few turns round street corners, Lauren had swiftly lost all sense of direction. There seemed no rhyme or reason to the place, the roads as varied and directionless as gaps between trees. It made her feel that she was in a strange and unknown forest, her woodcraft useless. Only a few men accompanied her, Corin, Byrne, and two more. The other constables had chased after Annis in her headlong flight. Lauren hoped she might face no further punishment for aiding the girl's escape. But she would have done it again. Annis deserved a life free from her mother, at least. Thoughts of Damaris piqued her curiosity. "What happened to the merchant? Is she slain?" Byrne snorted, his voice growing crueler. "She is within the city. In fact, she greatly desires to speak with you when she may." Shock overcame Lauren's fear. "What? But her men attacked you." "Mayhap you should not have fled then." Byrne's fingers tightened again, and Lauren knew her skin would bruise. "Once you left, she halted the fighting and claimed the Magestones were your property." What? Said Lauren, utterly lost. Magestones was a foreign word to her.
We could not gainsay her without you there to defend yourself, said Corin, though that may not have mattered in the end. The family of Yelnin has a long reach, and their influence can be felt even behind the walls of Cabras.
Hey, hello again, Dread. I would have had their heads, and well justified, said Byrne. But that blame goes to you, girl. I do not even know what the things were. Search Damaris's wagons. You will find plenty more, I assure you.
Not now, said Corin. As she spoke, the mayor's envoy arrived with a writ of passage. Her wagons have no doubt been cleared, their cargo well hid.
And all thanks to you, said Byrne. Lauren felt sick. Ennis's action should have cast the king's justice towards Damaris, freeing Lauren to find safe passage to other lands. But it seemed she had aided the merchant's crimes after all, and earned Byrne's ire in doing so. She was trapped, just as surely as when she traveled with the caravan, and without Annis or any other ally, her escape seemed even less likely than before. The constables paused for a moment as a line of carriages proceeded through an intersection. Lauren's eyes flitted back and forth, seeking an opportunity. Byrne must have sensed it, for his grip tightened again. Lauren whimpered as stabbing pain shot through her shoulder. "You are hurting me." "Not near as deep as I would like." Corin scowled.
If she will be put to the question, then leave it for the mayor's men. It is not our place.
Nor is it our place to lose the wizard's tail. Nor is it our place to lose the wizard's trail, nor allow smugglers of magestones to wander unmolested, and yet we have done both. I, for one, am tired of duties unfulfilled. And lest you forget, this one sent us on a wild chase through the birchwood while she escaped with our quarry. Corin's frown deepened, but he spoke no further. The carriages passed, and they went on. Lauren's feet, long used to dirt and grass underfoot, soon wearied on the cobblestones. She stumbled more and more. Each time Byrne jerked her upright. Soon she cried out, and each time Corin's mood grew darker. But just as she thought he might speak again, they stopped. Above them loomed a building at least 10 paces tall. Lauren saw 3 rows of windows stretching across its width. She marveled at the sight. Nowhere in the birchwood had she ever seen a building with so much as a second floor. Then she looked closer at the top. That was my computer. Thanks for the host, Dread. Then she looked closer at the top row of windows and saw the thick steel bars that crossed them. A jail, then. 2 guards stood at the front door, and in their hands they held halberds, tall and gleaming. As Byrne drew close, one of the guards stepped forwards to place his halberd across the entryway. "Hold," he said. "What is this?" A prisoner for the cells. I am Constable Byrne, and this is my companion Corin. We come from Garsek on the king's business. Let us pass, for we have another runaway to pursue. The cells are full, said the guard. We have no room. Byrne's face grew uglier. Then take off some pickpocket's hand and set them loose. Our business is urgent. The guard drew up straighter, though still shorter than Byrne, and his eyes hardened. I take no orders from you. The master-at-arms has commanded that no more prisoners be brought here. Try the guard-house in the eastern district. A walk that would cost us the rest of the day, said Byrne. We have no time. My orders stand, said the guard stubbornly.
Where is your master-at-arms? Said Corin, adopting a diplomatic tone. Mayhap we could speak with him and convey the urgency of our mission.
The guard's eyes flitted to the broader constable. His quarters are upstairs, though I doubt his mind will change, even for constables who claim to be on the king's business. Byrne stiffened, but Corin put a placating hand on his shoulder.
We will attempt in any case. I will go.
No, snapped Byrne. I will have words, and when I am through he will wish he had never held up the king's justice. Take the girl. Take the girl. Lauren found herself shoved into Corin's grip too quickly to capitalize on the situation. Byrne took one of the other constables and disappeared within the building. Corin guided her to the side of the doorway. If she would ever have a chance to sway his mind, it would be now. "Constable Corin," she began, "I swear to you under the sky, I played no part in any scheme of the wizard's. He abandoned me as soon as we left the birchwood."
Corin's face only grew more stern. "And before, when you sent us chasing shadows, when you stole supplies to place in the wizard's hands, you played no part in that, did you? You played no part in that, did you?"
Lauren's face grew hot. I did not know what crimes he may have committed."
"Yet you knew we pursued him. You will face the king's justice for that, if nothing else. Now silence yourself while we find a place to keep you, for the time being."
"And what then? I cannot imagine I will enjoy the comforts of a roof and daily bread forever."
"We shall see," said Corin.
"We should ready her for the cell, sir," said the other constable, the one who had accompanied them through the city streets. "Take her weapons and such." Corin grunted assent. While the other constable took her arm, Corin knelt at Lauren's feet and squeezed her boots. Beneath the leather he felt her hunting knife, and his fingers plunged within to withdraw it. He stood and grasped her He stood and grasped her bow, prying it off her, but gently so the string did not break.
"Is that all? It will go better for you if you speak the truth."
Lauren thought for a moment of withholding the dagger, but he would only search her anyway, and lies would not help to sway his mood. "There is a dagger at my waist," she said. Corin nodded and threw back her cloak, and froze. His grim face became a mask of shock. Lauren stared at him, eyes wide, unsure of what to do. "Sir?" "Sir?" said the constable at her arm. Corin seemed to recover himself.
"That is enough here. Get up and see what is taking Constable Byrne so long."
The constable looked at Lauren with a frown. "But, sir—"
"You have an order, constable,"
said Corin, his voice suddenly gruff.
"Obey it."
The man left with a final, doubtful look at Lauren. Under the gaze of the guard at the door, Corin seized Lauren's arm and marched her around the corner to a narrow alley, pushing her into its mouth.
"Your dagger."
Oh my God, this microphone thing is killing me.
"Your dagger,"
he whispered, glancing over his shoulder as though the High King herself might hear.
"I wish I had seen it earlier. Much trouble might have been prevented."
Lauren swallowed, her thoughts spinning. She had no idea what he meant, but he had sent away his only companion to speak with her alone. That had to mean something, and she must choose her reply carefully. "How was I to know I should reveal it to you?"
Corin shook his head quickly. "Of course, I did not mean you were at fault. Only I would have done a great many things differently. This was not your intention, was it? Do they require you to be placed within the prison?"
They. The constable's emphasis on the word had been unmistakable. Who were they? Lauren knew only that it must have something to do with her dagger. "They do not," she said quickly. "I must remain free, to carry out their work. And," Lauren added, struck by inspiration, "to continue my pursuit of the wizard." Corin's eyes flooded with relief.
"Then I do not abandon my duty by releasing you. Find him, then, and bring him to their justice. Though I wish it were the king's, I think he will find yours less to his liking."
"Indeed," said Lauren, her heart racing. Could this mean what she thought?
"Go, then."
Corin glanced over his shoulder one last time. He shoved the hunting knife and bow into Lauren's hands. She hastily returned them to their places.
"I shall make it look as though you overcame me, and when you return to your masters, tell them I helped you."
"I will," said Lauren in an earnest tone she did not have to feign. "And I promise you, Constable Corin, they will be grateful." She turned with a whirl of her black cloak and started down the alley, but a thought seized her, and she turned back one last time. "Constable," she said, "where did the girl's mother go? The merchant, Damaris?"
Corin's lips pressed tightly together. "The Wormwing Inn in the north of Cabras. But if I may advise, my lady, I would warn you away from that place. Her guards will seek you out most eagerly, and they do not share our mutual respect for your masters."
"Your advice is well given and well heeded, Constable Corin. Fare thee well." She turned and vanished into the alley with a flutter of black cloth. I have got to grab water. I'm dying. Opa! Water. Chapter 17. Chapter 17. Chapter 17. Chapter 17. Is that a train in the background? God, sensitive ass microphone. We're just gonna let the train pass by. Chapter 17. Chapter 17. Chapter 17. Nightblade, Chapter 17. Nightblade, Chapter 17. Lauren ran until she could no longer see the jail towering above the neighboring buildings, and then ran several minutes more. Once she felt safely away from the place, she found a narrow gap between two buildings and slipped inside, doubling over to catch her breath. The air reeked of human refuse and rang with the sounds of shouting men and crying children. Lauren decided she rather hated the city. She must find Annis. Mayhap the girl had abandoned Lauren to the constables, or mayhap she had planned to return and rescue her. But Lauren must give her the benefit of the doubt, and not just for honor's sake. Lauren knew precious little about Cabris, or the lands beyond, and Annis seemed wise in all the ways Lauren was not. Her eyes raked the narrow alley, wondering which way to proceed. Her absent mind sent fingers brushing her dagger's hilt. At the feel of its leather, her attention snapped to it. What was this thing she carried upon her hip that could enspell a Blah. What was this thing she carried upon her hip that could enspell a constable into abandoning his duty? Who were they, the unknown masters Corin had spoken of? The dagger seemed more useful now, but altogether more dangerous. For anyone powerful enough to sway a constable must surely have enemies just as powerful. But whatever Corin knew of the dagger, not everyone shared the knowledge. Damaris had seen it, but had granted it no special significance. This was some shadowed knowledge, then, some great secret that surrounded the thing. Lauren wondered if she would ever learn the truth. For now she must think only of finding Annis. Lauren drew her cloak closer, covering the dagger against curious, knowing eyes. Then she emerged from the alley and into the street, wandering south and east, away from the jail. Before long her stomach spoke, so she... Oh, Lordy. Before long her stomach spoke, so she found a bakery and bought... Before long her stomach spoke, so she found a bakery and bought a roll with 2 pennies from the purse Annis had given her. She ate idly, losing herself in the streets, eyes traveling everywhere. In her forest she had had a keen sense of direction, but that proved useless here. She had to stop every few minutes to observe the sun and ensure she maintained a southeasterly course. Every building seemed new and confusingly different, and yet just like all the others. Then she saw something that was familiar, red leather armor. A pair of constables emerged from a door along the street, and Lauren's heart froze. But just as she readied herself to flee for the nearest alley, the men burst into raucous laughter and threw their arms about each other. Together they stumbled off down the street, and from inside the building Lauren heard many loud voices raised in laughter and song. A tavern. Lauren sighed with relief and resolved to keep a warier eye. Soon Lauren found herself coming under the gaze of many passersby. Soon Lauren found herself coming under the gaze of many passers-by. Some eyes took in the length of her fine black cloak, while others fixed upon the bow at her back. Fine clothing and simple weapons, these were an oddity, and many seemed to remark upon them. Lauren kept her head down and her eyes averted. She did not wish for tales of a green-eyed girl in a fine black cloak to reach the constables. It would not do to rely very heavily on Corin's protection. Eventually, the curious eyes grew too heavy. Lauren ducked down an alley, feeling better as her wariness abated. She thought of removing the cloak and stowing it in her travel sack, but that might worsen things considerably. Lauren had well noted that she looked different from most in Cabras. She had seen complexions of all hues, but few as pale as hers, and not once had she seen eyes of green. No, she must retain the cloak, though it brought its own kind of attention. She could find a simpler one later, but she had seen no clothiers yet, and she did not know where to look for one. Lauren walked farther down the alley to find a surprise. Where she thought it ended, instead it split both left and right. Both directions proceeded behind the buildings for many yards before turning once more. Mayhap she could make her ways through the city's shadows, then. Ennis had even said something about hiding in the city's poorer parts when they entered. If Ennis still walked free, she would likely seek the dark corners behind If Ennis still walked free, she would likely seek the dark corners behind buildings as well. So Lauren followed the alleys, keeping to the shadows of taverns and houses. She had to cross unsavory puddles and gingerly sidestep piles of refuse, but at least she avoided most eyes. Every so often she saw desolate beggars and cripples, all of them curled up in corners. Some eyed her with interest, and one or two rose, but Lauren flashed her dagger, and they vanished. That gave her a thrill, and she felt her confidence growing. Soon she made a game of leaping from darkness to darkness, avoiding the sunlight at all costs. Lauren fancied that she looked a bit like Menet dancing with his shadows. When a beggar would look up at the sound of her footsteps, she would dart to the nearest doorway and shroud herself in blackness until they looked away. After a while, she tired of the game. It brought her no closer to Annis. The next time Lauren saw a beggar, instead of dancing by, she walked right up to the woman. The beggar seemed impossibly old, her face holding more wrinkles than space in between. Still, her shriveled eyes glinted bright within their sockets, and those eyes tilted up sharply at Lauren's approach. Lauren kept an easy look on her face, but her hand hovered, ready for the dagger. "Well met, friend," said Lauren. "Mayhap you could help me." "Mayhap you could help me." So we gotta go real deep hick for this one. "Mayhap not as well, for I mayhap not as well, for I have no friends." "Mayhap not as well. Mayhap not as well, for I have no friends." Yeah, that's a good one. "Mayhap not as well, for I have no friends." The woman had a voice like an iron pot flung down a rocky slope. "It depends on what help you seek, and what gifts you have for those who aid you, out of the goodness of their hearts." Lauren smiled and reached to her belt. From her purse she pulled a silver penny. But when the woman held forth grubby hands to claim it, Lauren danced it back on her fingers, a trick she had learned from Bracken long ago. "Now then," said Lauren, "where would one go to find more like—" "Now then," said Lauren, "where would one go to find more like you, and worse besides?" The old woman's lips drew back in a sneer. Lauren nearly flinched at the sight of her old and well-browned teeth. "You're headed the right way already. Keep your feet pointed south and east, and you'll find the scum-sucking backside of this place soon enough." "You're headed the right way already. Keep your feet pointed south and east, and you'll find the scum-sucking backside of this place soon enough." "Thank you." Lauren flipped the coin into the air, and the beggar woman caught it deftly, shoving it up her sleeve. Lauren pulled another from her purse. "Another thing. I seek a young girl, mayhap one running from constables. She stands as high as my chest, with skin like the night, and a fine purple dress. Have you seen her?" The old woman shrugged. "See all kinds I do, and not just here. Oft-times I make for the streets where folk are plentiful and their coins more so. I seen plenty like what you say along the street. Young nobles' daughters love to flounce about on their pretty ponies with steel-clad guards close by, just to remind the rest of us how fat their bellies are." Lauren could not hide her disappointment. Still, she flipped the coin. It, too, disappeared into the old woman's sleeve. "Very well. May your day be bountiful." "It shall." "It shall," said the woman with a curious leer. "It shall," said the woman with a curious leer. Lauren felt a heavy blow against her back. She cried out and bounced against the wall beside the old woman, crashing to the ground on hands and knees. Another heavy blow struck her ribs, and she flipped to her back. A young man, skinny as a sapling but wiry with muscle, fell atop her. His grasping fingers seized her wrist as she went for the dagger, while his other hand groped at her purse. "Yeah. Younglings do not do well to flash around so much silver," said the old woman, looking down at Lauren with vicious amusement. "They get all kinds of eyes on them what they do not want. We would just as soon not open you up, girl. Give us what else you may." Atop her, the young man gave a mad laugh as his fingers wrapped around the coin purse. But if he thought Lauren a helpless young maid far from help and home, he thought wrong. Not for nothing had Chet forever refused to wrestle with her after his third try. The man held her dagger hand, but he had neglected the other. The man held her dagger hand, but he had neglected the other. Lauren clapped it against his ear. He released her wrist, howling, and Lauren slapped his other ear. He tumbled off her and hunched over his knees, glaring with hate. Lauren gained her feet, ready when he came again. She took his first punch on her shoulder and sank her fist into his gut. His breath left in a whoof, acrid and foul, and she struck him again just left of his temple. He fell back again, blinking hard. Then a knife flashed into his palm. Lauren's eyes widened and he came after her. It was all she could do to avoid his wild slashing. As she ducked and stepped back at the same time, her boot landed on her cloak and sent her crashing to the ground. She recovered and rose just in time, his blade slicing the air where she had lain. "Hold!" she cried, though she knew it was a mad request. He did not mean to scare her. He meant to slit her throat and take the purse from her cooling corpse. Still she tried again while scrabbling for her dagger. "Hold!" She heard her only reply in the old woman's cackle. But just as her fingers closed on the dagger's hilt, from the shadows of a doorway stepped another figure. Its fist lashed forth to mash into the young man's face, and Lauren saw the gleam of a metal gauntlet. The gutter snipe crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Lauren looked for the old woman, but she had gone, vanishing into the twists of the alley. Lauren's rescuer stood with his back to her. She could see only a red cloak thrown over broad shoulders, above which a shock of gray hair spoke of age, but as he turned around, Lauren was surprised to find light blue eyes set in a face free from a beard and almost free of wrinkles. Not as young as she, but mayhap not much older than Zane. Still, she could not deny the heavy wisdom that weighed in his eyes. The man had a face that Bracken would have called a grandfather's soul in his grandson's head. The man had a face that Bracken would have called a grandfather's soul in his grandson's head. Her fingers relaxed on the hilt of her dagger and emerged from her cloak. Those old eyes caught the movement. He studied her for a moment, as though he were thinking what to say, and then spoke in a soothing voice. Jordell. Shit, these are Jordell's first words. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. Okay. Jimmy Smits. Did his blade kiss you? No, that's... Oh God, okay. Did his blade kiss you? Did his blade kiss you? Did his blade kiss you? Lauren shook her head. No, I am no stranger to knife fights. She was, but thought it might not be wise to admit. This man could be a thief as well, and if so, he seemed more capable than the gutter snipe. He smiled at her words, and she wondered if he heard the lie inside them. But all he said was, Indeed. 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 That's the one. Silence stretched for a distance that neared awkward. Lauren studied the man while pretending to look anywhere else. He stood of average height, but something in his composure made him appear much taller. Lauren felt herself a small child in his presence. Under his dark red cloak he wore a shirt and sleeves of chain, as well as gauntlets of gleaming steel that folded over themselves. Some strange symbol clasped the cloak at his throat. 3 vertical rods bound by a ring like a shock of wheat, and wings sprouting from either side. Lauren had never seen anything like it. His hair he wore His hair he wore close-cropped, and no trace of stubble dusted his chin. Lauren realized how long she had inspected him and cleared her throat, trying to think of what to say. At last she said, "Thank you for your assistance, though I could have bested him. I am fortunate, I suppose, that you ensured it." "Fortunate, yes," said the man, his voice holding a trace of amusement. "Though my presence was no happenstance. I saw you quite some time ago, skulking from shadow to shadow. I hazarded a guess that you might be a stranger to these streets, and deemed it prudent to follow you in case you should find them—" Oh, son of a bitch. Microphone. "I hazarded a guess that you might be a stranger to these streets, and deemed it prudent to follow you in case you should find them less hospitable than you might wish." Lauren thought of that, and what a fool she must have looked to this imposing man. She straightened. "If you thought me in true danger, you need not have troubled yourself." She nudged the man on the ground with the toe of her boot. "This one would have found me a pricklier foe than I look." "Of that I have no doubt," said the man, inclining his head and taking a step back. I know I may take my leave in assurance of your safety, now that you have had a taste of Cabris's streets and alleys." "Very well, then," said Lauren, strangely sad to see him go. He nodded, turning it into a half-bow, and walked away. But just as he reached the corner and prepared to round it, he paused. After a moment he turned back, his blue eyes squinting slightly. "How long since you arrived in the city, if I may ask?" Lauren shrugged. "One loses track." "Indeed. Indeed." He could put such hidden meaning in that simple word. "I'm seeking a man. Mayhap you've seen him. Not overly tall, but neither is he short. Of just about your height, in fact. His hair falls in waves, and his eyes are a pale gray-brown. He may have worn a blue coat." His description of Zane was... He may have worn a blue coat? His description of Zane was so perfect that Lauren could not help herself. She stood flabbergasted, her mouth falling open in shock. Too late she tried to hide her reaction, and her teeth clicked as they shut. He stiffened. "You have seen him?" "Never," said Lauren. "I only wondered what sort of fool would walk about in a bright blue coat. If I had seen him, he would be lighter a coin purse, I can assure you." He took a step forwards, and Lauren tensed, but he moved only out of eagerness, and made no move to grip a weapon or attack. "It is most urgent that I find this man. I would offer a mighty reward for any information that led to his location." He drew back his red cloak to show his belt, and Lauren saw 2 fat purses hanging there, but she also saw a sword. Almost she felt tempted, but something held her back. Lauren knew nothing of this man or his intentions, and whatever Zane had done, he had not earned her betrayal. So she shrugged and raised her eyebrows. "Gladly will I take your purse if it weighs so heavily at your belt, but I fear you would gain nothing from the purchase. I will admit an urge to lie and give you worthless information, but I will not cheat a man who tried to save my life, needless though his aid might have been." The man studied her a long moment, and Lauren felt bare beneath his piercing gaze. "I do not seek to harm the wizard," he said in an even voice. "I ask you to remember that. If, by some chance, you should discover something about him, I would beg that you find me. While I remain in the city, you may find me at the Wormwing Inn." He turned and left. He turned and left. Chapter 18. Lordy Lord. Chapter 18. Chapter 18. Chapter 18. Nightblade, Chapter 18. Nightblade, Chapter 18. Nightblade, Chapter 18. Lauren's heart fluttered. Damaris, too, had taken a room at the Wormwing. Were they in league? She supposed not, for then the man in the red cloak would have had Lauren's description. It did not matter. She had no... Excusey, God almighty. It did not matter. She had no desire to seek the place out, and now she stood in much the same straits as when Corin had released her. She had to find Annis, and still had little idea where to look. She turned her feet south and east again, making her way... Thank you, microphone. She turned her feet south and east again, making her way as best she could through the city's alleys. Now she observed the beggars with a wary eye, avoiding them where she could. When she had to pass one, she sank a hand into her cloak and placed it on the dagger. Whether they saw a threat in the gesture or for some other reason, she always passed unmolested. Soon the alleys grew sparse, the streets more plentiful, and the difference between them diminished. Before long, Lauren found herself walking on crowded avenues covered with more filth than she had found even in the alleys. This must be the area Annis spoke of, she thought. But when she found a wide square to gain some sense of direction, still she could not see the city wall. If anything, she felt more lost than when she began her search. If I walked in Annis's shoes, what would I do? As a child used to wealth and raised into plenty, she might try to find an inn. Then again, she might find no inn to meet her standards. She might shed her wealthy clothing for beggar's rags to blend in, but then again she might find such rags too louse-ridden and threadbare. In truth, Lauren knew little of what Annis might do. How could she know the mind of a girl brought up into wealth and privilege? Other than fleeing their families, they had nothing in common. Lauren felt a nagging in the back of her mind. She was attracting curious looks again. In this district her fine cloak stood out like a crow in a blue sky. Whatever course she decided on, it had to be better than standing here looking lost. She chose a direction and struck out, walking as though with purpose. Though the streets might be overrun with the poor and the unfortunate, they were nearly empty of constables. She saw only one, leaning against a wall to whisper in the ear of a woman whose skirt rode high. Lauren looked hastily away. Even she knew the purpose of such a conversation as that. She did not bother to hide her face as she passed, and the constable's eyes never diverted from their goal. Long and longer she wandered, up and down streets, into squares and alleys, until the sun drew behind the tops of the taller buildings. Sun. Lauren watched it with mounting anxiety. She did not desire to wander these streets come sundown. That meant she must find an inn for the night. But how could she know which one to choose, one where she might still live come morning? She could not help but think that Annis would know what to do. When her stomach growled again in protest, she stopped at a tavern to order a stew. Above the door hung a sign that showed a princess dancing with a boar. Above the door hung a sign that showed a princess dancing with a boar. Letters were scrawled beneath it. An old and stooped man passed, and Lauren seized his arm before pointing up at the sign. "Grandfather, how does the sign read?" He barely glanced at it before pursing his lips.
"I never learned my letters neither, but I know its name. The Princess Pig."
Inside she paid extra to keep the bowl and wooden spoon, and she carried the stew with her into the street. She did not wish to pause her search when Annis might wander by at any moment. She had neared the end of the bowl when a street urchin passed, massive eyes imploring her from a gaunt face. The boy did not look older than 10 summers. "Have you any to spare, please?" he said in a tiny voice. He rubbed the back of a hand across his swarthy forehead, which only served to smear dirt across it. Lauren's appetite vanished. The stew had grown cool anyway. "Here, keep the bowl. You can use it to collect alms." The boy's eyes, impossibly wide already, grew even larger. "Oh, mercy, my lady! Oh, mercy, my lady!" he gasped. "Thank you! Thank you!" Before Lauren could stop him, he lunged forwards and wrapped her in a hug. The poor child's head scarcely reached her chest, and his arms felt like thin wooden rods as they pressed into her back. "That is enough," Lauren said, trying to sound gruff. "Be off with you before I take it back." The boy nodded vigorously and turned to scamper away. Lauren could not stop a small smile as she turned away from him. But then some instinct seized her. Something was odd. Different. Lauren slammed a hand against her hip to find her coin purse gone. A pair of frayed strings hung from her belt. She whirled to see the boy's tiny form retreating between a tavern and a tanner's shop next door. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" she cried. The boy turned for the space of a blink. He smiled with his tongue poking through his lips, and then he turned and sprinted away. "Does no one in this city keep their thieving hands to themselves?" cried Lauren, and chased after him. She rounded the corner so fast she nearly skidded to a fall. Only luck stopped her, letting her bounce off the wall instead and keep running. The boy fled like a rabbit, any trace of frailty or weakness gone. His bare, filthy feet pounded across the stones. He spun once as he ran, flinging the empty bowl at Lauren. She barely got a hand up in time, and the bowl cracked off her forearm. This boy was fast, but years of hunting with Chet, running for hours through the forest to reach the best grounds, had given Lauren an endurance unmatched by any in her village. Every time he reached the gap between two buildings and dodged through, Lauren seemed to have gained a little ground. The boy noticed as well, for his occasional looks over his shoulder slowly took on an air of fear. Her blood boiled. How dare this boy steal from her? She was the Nightblade. He soon changed tack. "All right, later, Dredd. Have fun adulting." He soon changed tack, using size to his advantage. He found narrow gaps in wooden fences and stone walls and leaped through like a rabbit, but the boy could find nothing too narrow for Lauren. Though she sometimes paused to preserve her bow, always she made up the distance in the next long sprint from building to building. As she drew nearer, Lauren felt a grin spread across her face. You run a pretty race, little rabbit. You run a pretty race, little rabbit, but this wolf... You run a pretty race, little rabbit, but this wolf will catch you." The boy answered by increasing his pace. He diverted course suddenly, running straight for a wall that had a tall wooden gutter affixed to it. He seized the gutter in his hands, propped his feet against it, and shimmied up like a bear cub climbing a sapling. On the nearer wall, the building had 2 rows of windows with wooden sill. Lauren leaped for the first window sill. Her fingers gripped its wooden texture as easily as a tree branch, and she vaulted up to seize the next one. She pulled hard and pushed up with her feet, leaping to seize the shingle roof with her fingertips before hauling herself up. The roof sloped gently upward. She ran up and reached the peak just as the boy scaled it. He barely had time to look up in surprise before Lauren took him in a flying tackle, slamming him hard into the shingles. The boy cried out, more from fear than pain, and tried to squirm away beneath her, but Lauren wrapped one arm around his torso and used it to flip him face down. She caught his neck in the crook of her elbow. "You would do well to stop," she growled in his ear. There was no... "You would do well to stop," she growled in his ear. "There was no better wrestler than I in my village." The boy went tense and still below her, panting heavily. Then the fight left him all at once, and he went limp. "Now," said Lauren, "where is my purse?" The boy said nothing, but she spied a bit of brown cloth poking out from between his tightly curled fingers. She freed one hand and snatched it, trying to pry his fingers open. The boy said nothing, but she spied a bit of brown cloth poking out from between his tightly curled fingers. She freed one hand and snatched it, trying to pry his fingers open. A bit of his spirit returned, and he gripped the purse more tightly. Lauren slammed his hand onto the shingles, and he cried out, letting go with a belch. Lauren slammed his hand onto the shingles, and he cried out, letting go with a whimper. Lauren slammed his hand onto the shingles, and he cried out, letting go with a whimper. She snatched the purse and pushed up, rolling away to inspect her prize. The boy had cut the strings, which hung in frayed tatters. Still, they were long enough to retie around her belt, and she took a moment to do so. All the while, she kept a careful eye on the boy. As soon as she removed herself from him, he leaped up into a crouch, looking like a cornered rat. But as Lauren made no further move, gradually his narrowed eyes softened. Once she finished retying the purse, Lauren got to her feet. The boy recoiled, ready for a fight, but Lauren only dusted herself off and flapped her hands as if shooing a cat. "Go on, then. Off with you. Be gone." The boy studied her carefully. "You mean you do not want to fight?" Lauren scoffed. "Fight one such as you? I would break you in half, and for what? You are only a little boy, and the worst thief I have ever seen." The boy finally released his crouch, standing as tall as his diminutive frame would allow. "A bad thief? Never! Never! I steal 1,001 purses each day, and never have I ever been caught, excepting only you, and there's nary a one better in Cabras when it comes to rooftops." He glanced at the gutter he had climbed, and then eyed Lauren ruefully. "Well, excepting only you, I suppose." Lauren laughed at him. 1,001 purses every day? Then you must be the wealthiest man in the 9 lands. How could you even... Lauren laughed at him. 1,001 purses every day? Then you must be the wealthiest man in the 9 lands. How could you even count them all? "I know my numbers better than a wizard," the boy boasted. "And my letters as well. I could have been a scholar if I'd been born in a noble house, and a wiser man you would never have seen." "I could have been a scholar if I had been born in a noble house, and a wiser man you would never have seen." "I could have been a scholar if I had been born in a noble house, and a wiser man you would never have seen." Lauren rolled her eyes. She had never learned to read, and might have been impressed by his boasts if she had thought there might be even a crumb of truth to them. She had never learned to read, and might have been impressed by his boasts if she had thought there might be even a crumb of truth to them. "Very well, Master Scholar, or was it wizard, or thief? Consider me honored to be in your presence. Now, remove yourself from mine before I give you a beating you will not soon forget." He scowled, trying to look fierce, but his dirt-brown face with its fawn's eyes only looked the more ridiculous. He scowled, trying to look fierce, but his dirt-brown face with its fawn's eyes only looked the more ridiculous. "Why do you withhold yourself? I can take it. I have grown up fighting, and many know to fear my fists. You are a stranger to this city, clearly, if you have never heard the tale." He raised his hands to demonstrate, waving them back and forth as though he might throw a punch. Lauren seized a wrist and used it to spin him around before she caught his feet with her ankle. She lowered him gently to the roof rather than letting him crash down, and then put a foot on his throat to hold him there. He lay there for a moment, blinking as though unsure quite what had happened. "Oh, I can see the strength of your fists most clearly. How could I have thought to challenge such a mighty warrior?" "I am mighty," he said, "I am mighty," he said, hitting her boot with his free fist. "I am Auntie's favorite. She always says so." "I do not know your aunt, but she seems a poor judge of fighting skill." Lauren let him go. "Not my aunt," said the boy, rising. He rolled his eyes as though she were an idiot. "Auntie. She runs us. Me and the children, I mean. At least until I am of age to take over, for as I have said, I am the most fearsome pickpocket in Cabris." His words drew Lauren's interest. "This auntie you speak of, you say she commands you? You say she commands you? You and the other children?" The boy nodded emphatically. "Aye, the most feared thieves' guild in all the 9 lands. And you all..." Ooh, definitely last chapter for the day. "And you all pickpockets? Cut purses?" He shook his head. "Only the smallest, like me. Everyone thinks we are too young to be a threat. The bigger boys, Auntie has them do the heavy work, steal from wagons, taverns, and inns, jobs of that sort." "Steal from wagons, taverns, and inns, jobs of that sort." "Steal from wagons, taverns, and inns, jobs of that sort." Lauren's pulse began to race, and an idea formed in her mind. The boy surely exaggerated, but she had heard tales of thieves' guilds from Bracken. The boy surely exaggerated, but she had heard tales of thieves' guilds from Bracken. The old man had said that gangs of pickpockets and burglars roamed the underbelly of every great city in the 9 lands. They knew the alleys better than anyone. Thieves delved into the cracks and corners and crevices that no one else dared explore. What better way to find Annis? And failing that, where better to begin her new life as Nightblade? She could not remain in Cabris by herself forever, but what if she had a dozen or more companions to help her? She could not remain in Cabris by herself forever, but what if she had a dozen or more companions to help her stay hidden? Her mind made up, she drew up and placed her hands on her hips, eyes hardening as she fixed the boy with a stern glare. Despite his bravado, he quailed a bit. "Do you have a name, boy?" "Only the best," he said. "Only the best," he said, lifting his chin. "Gem, they call me, for I am a jewel among dirt." "Well, Gem," said Lauren, I think you had best take me to this auntie of yours." Chapter 19. Oh, that is it for me today. Boy, my voice is getting a little worn out. It's almost as though this is a taxing endeavor, which, yeah. Okay. I'm going to end stream. Thank you to Dread for coming by. I'm going to rest up. Peace out, everyone. I will catch you next time. What chapter are we on now? 19. Oh, we're halfway there. Almost. 2 chapters left, and then we're halfway there. All right.